All right, welcome everyone to tonight's Code with Jason Meetup. Tonight we're going to talk about ChatGPT, which I know is a topic that a lot of people are interested in. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff, and then we're going to demo. I'm going to demo this program I've been working on that does TDD with ChatGPT, ChatGPT-assisted TDD. Okay, so here's what I want to say first. When I started using ChatGPT, the most obvious use case for it seemed to be to write code. Because before that, we had GitHub Copilot. And I was never like a big GitHub Copilot guy because it kind of solved a problem I didn't really have. Like, my bottleneck is not the typing of the code. It's more like the high level planning and stuff like that. The typing is not the hard part. And I know it's not quite fair to characterize it that way, but that's kind of how I viewed that. And so I didn't get in on that whole thing. But ChatGPT, I find much different. But anyway, people were using Copilot to write code for them, at least little bits at a time. And so it seemed like the obvious use case for ChatGPT was to write code. But then I discovered a couple problems. One is that the code ChatGPT writes it's often not usable. It's wrong. It makes stuff up, whatever. It's not great. And a lot of other people discovered the same thing. But there's other reasons not to use ChatGPT to write code. Because when would you ever just want to take a chunk of code from somewhere and just paste it into your code base? Like, it doesn't matter how that code came into existence. It could have been written by an AI, or it could have been written by the smartest programmer you know. Like, you wouldn't just take a chunk of code and paste it into your code base. And the reason, of course, is because, or at least one reason, is because you want to verify that code to make sure it does what you think it does. And you have a couple options for that. Like, one option, let's say you have this 20-line function from ChatGPT and you want to use it, but first you want to verify that it does what you think it does. You could test it manually, and that could be pretty painful probably, because you have to take this existing piece of code and then somehow like try to figure out like all the possible execution paths through this piece of code and exercise all those execution paths by manually clicking UI or manually running this program with all sorts of different inputs to exercise this chunk of code every possible way you could exercise it. And then at the end, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be like 100% confident that I tested everything. The only way that I would feel confident is if I blanked it out and then I'm still talking about manual tests, is if I blanked it out and then performed a test and saw that that test failed, and then added a single line and then performed one or more tests that exercised the behavior of that line, and then did the same thing over and over. And the reason for performing the test first before you add that line is because if you don't do that, you're susceptible to false positives. It's not never that I devise a test and then I discover that my test passes irrespective of the thing I'm trying to test, because I devised an invalid test that'll always give a false positive. So you have to verify for yourself that your test is not a false positive by running your test, which again can be manual or not manual, by running your test before there's any code present, and show yourself that you won't get a false positive. Anyway, doing that process line by line, and of course it's the exact same process for writing automated tests. You write the automated test, run it, observe that it fails, put the code in that makes the test pass, or at least that you expect to make the test pass, run the test again, see if it actually does make the test pass. If you're going to take that function that ChatGPT gave you and write a test individually, pull over a line, write another test, individually pull over a line, and do that with the entire function. It's like, what are you really gaining? Not much. It's like about equal pain to write your test and to come up with your own code line by line. And so I think having ChatGPT write like chunks of code like that is not only not the main use case for it, but I don't think it's a good use case for it at all. So let's scratch that. Let's scratch that off the list, or at least I scratch it off my list. Here's what ChatGPT is good for, I think. I'll say real quick that like there's a big difference between generating a chunk of code with the intention of putting it into your production code base and then committing it, and generating a chunk of code as an illustration. Because I think it's great for an illustration. I have no problem with saying, hey, give me a piece of code that does this. And then I see it and I'm like, oh, that's how you do that. Okay, I'll do something kind of similar. And Johnny, did you have a comment? Oh, I can't hear you too good. Johnny, if you did have a comment, maybe you could type it in the chat. But I don't know if that was just background noise. Anyway, I made a list. I made a list of all the things that are included in the work of a programmer. Because here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make like a more or less exhaustive list of like, what are all the things I do as a programmer? And then for each one of those, is ChatGPT helpful? And so I made a list, and it's actually, I thought it would be like 4 or 5 things, but there's like 15 things in the list. I'll read them off real quick. And if anybody can think of more, maybe type them in the chat and I'll add those to my list. So the first one is receiving and negotiating acceptance criteria. And hang on a second. I want to see if this is in the order that I think it's in. Because, okay, I'm going to actually say these in a different order. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say is researching tools and libraries. This is a huge one that I think ChatGPT can be really helpful with. Think about this. Imagine you need to deploy an app to AWS using Kubernetes. And let's say you know nothing about AWS, nothing about Kubernetes, but you need to use them together. And the trouble is, at the beginning, you don't even know what you don't know. All you know is that you don't know enough. So you go and research AWS. You read all kinds of stuff, because again, you don't know what you need to know. So you're just learning a bunch. And then you go to Kubernetes and you don't know what you need. So you read a whole bunch. And then maybe periodically you step back and you say, okay, now I know more than nothing. Is this enough to like kind of get started on this project? If it's not, then you go back and research some more. And at the end of it, by the time you've finished this project and you've gotten a deployment with AWS and Kubernetes, you will have learned so much stuff that you now know you never needed to know and will never need to know. It was pure waste. There's no benefit to that. And what you can do with ChatGPT is just eliminate all that waste. And what might that waste might be half. It might even be more than half of the time you spent researching, just stuff you learned that you didn't need to. So you can ask ChatGPT, make me a tutorial on deploying a Kubernetes AWS application, and it'll tell you more or less only what you need to know. And if it tells you too little, you can say, hey, I didn't understand this part. Explain that a little more thoroughly. And it will. Or if it gives you something that's too detailed, you can say, whoa, that's way too detailed. Give me like the high level overview so I can understand that. And it will. So it eliminates so much waste. Okay. Another job of programmers is to just look up syntax and other language features. Obviously, ChatGPT is really good for this. it's not like the hugest leverage thing you can do, because like you can still use Google, and Google is pretty good for that stuff. So this isn't like world changing. The research stuff, that to me is huge. Like that's one of the things that like I'm using it daily for that kind of stuff now. Planning, a big part of what we do as programmers is planning. We have to accomplish something. We're not sure exactly how we want to go about it. So we plan it before we go about it. And ChatGPT is surprisingly helpful with this. Non-technical example, I wanted to make my own self-published programming book. Hang on, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm not going to reveal it yet. I'll save it for dramatic effect in just 1 second. But I'd wanted to write a self-published programming book for like months and months, and I never could like figure out how to come at it. It was just too big and too ambiguous of a project, and it was one of those things where it's like I didn't know where to start, so I just never started. So I went and I asked ChatGPT, how can I publish a high quality self-published programming book? And it gave me these like 12 steps. And I looked at each one of those steps, and individually, each one was manageable. It was like, write the content and use Markdown. It's like, okay, I can do that. It's like, find a freelance editor to edit your content. I'm like, okay, that sounds achievable. It said like use Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing and upload your files to there. I'm like, okay, I can do. And so every one of these steps individually seemed very achievable, even though the whole project seemed super daunting. And so I said, okay, if I can do all 12 of these things, I can do the whole project. And then like a week later, I got my own self-published book in the mail, and it actually, like, you probably can't see that too well, but like it looks decent. Like if I bought this at the store, I would be like, this is a book. It's a real book. So that's pretty great. By the way, this is totally a placeholder. It just says Rails testing book. That's not the real title. But I'm in the process of rewriting this entire thing. I intend it to be a lot bigger than this.
The RSpec way.
Well, I had that actually occurred to me, something like that. I had a title
on the Rails way, of course.
Right, exactly. And there's also the Ruby way. I'm going to call it something else, but I don't remember what. Anyway, ChatGPT helped me with that big time, and it can help with programming stuff too. I've used it in that exact same way, but for programming work instead of writing a book. Here's another huge one: diagnosing and fixing bugs and error messages. ChatGPT can be really good at this. And as we go and do more sessions on ChatGPT, which I plan to, we'll look at some techniques for doing this. Here's one thing. If you guys haven't tried this, it might blow your mind. If I'm trying to diagnose a bug, I'll give ChatGPT what's called a system command. And I just learned about this literally yesterday, so I don't even know if I'm getting this right. I'm just learning myself. But a system command is kind of like a meta prompt. You're telling it, here's how we're going to do things in this session. So for the system command, I say this: hey, I have this bug that I want you to help me diagnose. I want you to ask me to paste you files from my code base, and when I do, either give me the diagnosis, or if you don't have enough information for the diagnosis yet, ask me for either more code or more information. So that flips the roles. Instead of now I have to bear the burden of coming up with all the questions, ChatGPT is now the one coming up with the questions, and it reduces my mental effort that I need to expend, because all this stuff is about reducing mental effort. Like that first item I mentioned with the research and cutting down on the wasteful learning, that's cutting down the mental effort. This is the same idea. So I'll say that to ChatGPT and I'll say, by the way, here's the error I'm getting right now or the problem I'm seeing, whatever. And it'll say, okay, based on that error message, I think I want to see this certain file. It'll usually give me the precise path. And so I just go to that file, paste the whole thing into GPT, and it says, all right, oh, it looks like there's an association from this model to this model. So based on that, show me this other file. So I do it. And then it says, okay, you're missing such and such. And lo and behold, it's usually right. So that's great. And by the way, if you're concerned about pasting your code into ChatGPT, first of all, it's one thing if like your employer's not okay with it, but like if it's your code that you actually own, there's like the risk of a bad actor like actually doing something harmful with your code is like so negligible. I'd be more afraid of like aliens coming and bombing my house than I would of that, because like if somebody wants to attack your code base, like how are they going to do that? Like what's the path there? Are they just going to type like random prompts that and they hope that your code somehow comes up? Or are they going to like hack into the open AI server logs or something like? And even if they do get their hands on like 10 of your files, what are they going to do with those files? Like there's nothing they can do. Obviously don't paste in credentials and stuff like that, but like that's not even what we're talking about anyway. Anyway, that's a super powerful way to use GPT. Again, flip the roles, have it ask you for code, and then it basically does all the work for you. Another thing many of us do as programmers is we write tests. And even though I think it's not a good idea to have ChatGPT write our code for us, I do think it can be a good idea to have it write our tests for us. The difference is that application code has to meet specifications, whereas the tests are the specifications. And ChatGPT can do two things. One is it can help you come up with test cases, and two is it can help you with a boilerplate. Like you can say, give me an RSpec test scenario that does such and such. And it'll give you, you know, the include, require RSpec, all that stuff that nobody ever wants to think about. It'll just plop that stuff in there for you. And you can just do the stuff that you uniquely are suited to as a human being. So that's also good. So I've sorted this list into the first several things are things I think ChatGPT is good at, and everything that follows from now on is things I think it's bad at. Refactoring existing code. Has anybody tried this? The results are usually not good. It usually like obfuscates the code in my experience. So that's not good. It like doesn't know what you want. A human needs to be in the driver's seat for that one. By the way, like a lot of the stuff, like there's logic and then there's art. And a lot of these things that are more on the art side of things, you want to have a human calling the shots because somebody has to be in charge at some level. And so with refactoring, like that's where I want to be in charge and calling the shots, at least at a high level. Okay, I screwed up because the next one is reading and comprehending existing code. ChatGPT can help a lot with that one. Similar thing to where during debugging, you can say, hey, ask me to paste you files and help me diagnose this bug. You can say, help me understand this like concept I don't understand in this code base, and I'll paste you files. It'll help you understand it. It'll like summarize stuff. It's actually pretty helpful. Installing and updating tools and libraries, I don't see how it can help you with that. Not much more to say about that. One thing we have to do is like gain understanding of existing systems by talking with our teammates. Obviously, it can't really help with that, although maybe it could suggest like ways, like questions to ask people or something like that, but I don't think it could help that much. receiving and negotiating acceptance criteria. I don't see how ChatGPT could really help with that one. That seems like a thing that requires like judgment. And again, it's like things that have to do with like art and taste and stuff like that. I don't think that's really the domain of AI. I think that's the domain of humans. Just two more items here. Deciding the scope of commits and branches and deployments and stuff like that. Again, I think that's a thing where we want to have a human calling the shots. Those are like kind of, I don't want to say arbitrary decisions, but it's a matter of, you could call it taste. Like, I've known really, really smart people who like have never grasped the concept of like continuous delivery and stuff like that. Like that's kind of a taste idea. So again, I think that's not the domain of ChatGPT. Then my last item is deciding how to respond to interruptions and changing priorities and stuff like that. You're working on one thing, somebody asks you to do something else instead. It's like, that's again, kind of a human judgment kind of thing. So that's my list so far of things that programmers need to do and whether ChatGPT should or should not help with those things. If anybody has anything that they think doesn't fall under one of those, I'd be really curious to see it in the chat. Or if anybody disagrees with any of those ones I said, if you think it could help with something I said it couldn't or other way around, I'd be really interested to hear about that. Okay, so let's talk about TDD for a second, and then I'll demo this thing that I've created. Like I've said, ChatGPT isn't good for writing your code, but it can be good theoretically for writing your tests. But what if you had ChatGPT write a test for you, and then you gave it the error message for the test, and you said, make this test pass, write just enough code to make this test pass. And then I took just that one line, because it's one line, so I can still like be holding the reins because I'm not just blindly copying a big chunk. I'm just taking one line. And again, we have the test for it. That matters a lot. We have the test for it. We see it. It's making this test pass. I am still in complete control over every minute step at this point. We add enough code to at least make the error message go away. We run the test again. Maybe there's still a failure message, a different one. If so, we paste it back into ChatGPT and say, write just enough code to make this message go away, and so on until it passes. Once it passes, we conceive of a new requirement, a new test, and just repeat that process. And I was curious, logically, I can't see any reason why GPT can't write the test and the code. And I also can't think of any reason why, all I have to do is come up with the test cases and it can do everything else, at least in theory. So I said, what if I try to build this? And so I did, and it kind of works. Kind of. So this is what we're going to take a look at now. This program that I wrote that's like ChatGPT-assisted TDD. And again, it only kind of works, but this is an early prototype. I'm going to share my screen.
Can I ask really quickly?
Yeah, please do.
Something. Are these opinions that you have given formulated from using your tool, or are they formulated from using ChatGPT in the web browser?
The latter. Yeah, this tool I've created is purely experimental. I have gotten zero actual economic production benefit out of it. So this thing that I'm about to demo is currently just for fun. Okay, so I will share my screen. And I know on Zoom there can kind of be a delay with screen sharing. So please let me know via audio when you guys are able to see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's what we're going to do first. And I have on my other monitor some stuff I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to give ChatGPT a system command. and we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I want to build a command line program that and by the way, I had to contrive some program that I wanted to write. So I decided on a program that takes some some text, and then it prints a numbered list with counts of the words that appear in the text. So I even gave an example to ChatGPT, which can serve to explain it to you guys too. So if, for example, I give it early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, then the output should be as follows. And you can see that output there. And I already made a mistake because there was actually another system command that I was supposed to give it first. So bear with me a second while I grab that. Okay, so here's my system message. And I'm going to copy it. And I'm just going to start fresh with a new prompt because I don't want the baggage of what I just did to come along with it. Okay, so this is obviously huge. So we'll talk about this a bit. This like contraption I made up, I'm calling it GPT-TDD. It's kind of a dumb name, but I don't care because this is just experimental. So it's a command line program that allows programmers to write programs in a TDD style with the assistance of ChatGPT. And then I give it some explanations and I say, well, the other part is not that important. It basically just says, when I repeat these instructions to you, you should update your behavior. And here's the workflow. I'm giving it an example using a fictional programmer named Derek. So Derek thinks of a requirement. For example, when I fill out the title and content fields of this blog post form and click Save Draft, my blog post shows up in a list of drafts. So that's what Derek would supply to ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT would write some test code based on Derek's requirement. Derek would then copy that test code from ChatGPT and paste it into GPT-TDD. And then my program, GPT-TDD, would update the code base with the new test code, and then it automatically runs the relevant test files. If the test fails, okay, so I'm going to stop saying Derek. I'm Derek in this situation. I'm going to copy the failure output to ChatGPT. ChatGPT will then give me the application code to make that failure go away. And then I'll put it back into GPT-TDD, and then we repeat from step one. And this is like a lot of stuff. I'm not going to read all this out loud, but basically I noticed like certain minor mistakes that GPT would make. So I said things like, never put in comments because like that's just superfluous. Never add lines that consist of only white space, like just minor stuff like that. Anyway, ChatGPT said to me, "Thank you for the instructions. They are clear and well explained." Thanks, ChatGPT. Could you please provide an overall description of the application that you would like to build? After that, could you provide the first requirement for this application? Okay, so I jumped the gun earlier, but now is the appropriate time for me to tell ChatGPT about this program that I want to build. Okay, understood. That's a very useful application for text analysis. Dubious. It's always nice when the AI overlords give you approval. Indeed it is. Okay, let's start with the first requirement. When I provide a string of text to the command line application, it should return a numbered list of words with their counts sorted by occurrence and then alphabetically. And this is fascinating because I ran this earlier today as an experiment. It didn't respond this way. It didn't ask me if it was correct, but whatever. I'm going to say yes. Start with writing the first test. Wonderful. Okay, and I included in the instructions that it should start each file with a path to that file, because then my program, when I feed this code in, it'll know where to put it. Okay, and I actually don't like this test. This test is like too big. For me as a human, this is like too hard to understand. There's too many words. So I'm going to tell it to start again. This test has too many words. It's too hard for me to understand. Do a similar test, but with a shorter string with fewer words. You're absolutely right. Okay, well, thanks for acknowledging my correctness, ChatGPT. Apple, apple, banana. I think that's a better string. Okay, I think I'm happy with this. Okay, it says, please copy the above test into your program and let me know the result when you run it. Okay, so I'm going to start GPT-TDD, and it says, please paste your file and type EOF on a new line when done, or exit to quit. Okay, so there's that EOF. Okay, it saved the test file and then it ran the test file. It says cannot load such file word counter. That makes sense because we don't have a file called word counter. This is just a blank repo. Okay, so I'm gonna copy and paste the failure message. Let's create that file now. Okay, we'll start with an empty class word counter. That's great because I don't want something that will actually make the test pass necessarily. I just want something that'll make the current failure message go away. So I'll paste that in. Again, once I pasted it, automatically ran the tests again. And now we're actually getting the same error again. But I'm not even going to trouble myself with thinking about why. I'm just going to paste it right back to ChatGPT. Okay, so apparently ChatGPT screwed up the first time. Now it's fixing its mistake. So I'm going to take this file, paste it in. Okay. Now we get a different failure message. Undefined method count for blah, blah, blah. That makes sense because there is no method called count. Let's see what it does. Let's see if it just defines an empty method or if it actually puts anything in it. I want it to just define an empty method. Wonderful. I'm so proud of ChatGPT. Okay, now it says it expected this result and got nil. Not surprising, obviously, because that method doesn't actually do anything. Okay. All right, now I'm going to copy this, paste it in. Now the test passes. So all I did was tell ChatGPT this one requirement. And also, to be fair, I told it that I didn't like its test and I made it rewrite that one. But other than that, all I did was copy paste stuff. I didn't like think at all. And ChatGPT did TDD for me. I think that's pretty nuts. Okay. So the question is, what now? And my answer is, now that ChatGPT actually gave me some real code, again, I want to be in the driver's seat. I want to understand all this stuff. And I'm going to take a pause for a second and explain something that I think a lot of people don't understand yet. Some people think ChatGPT or AI in general will take our jobs. It won't. I can confidently say that it won't. Think about this, like, okay, a couple things. The speed limit for us building software systems is not how fast AI can write code. It's not even how fast code can be written. It's not how fast code can be written in general. The speed limit is how competently we can understand the systems we create, because the systems need to be understood by humans. Because imagine if you had a job where you were responsible for a system that you didn't understand. That would put you in a tough spot. And think about this also. Imagine you're the owner of a business and you have a dev team of 5 developers. And let's say AI gets sufficiently smart that you can fire all 5 developers and just have AI do all that work instead. Well, before, the responsibility for maintaining that application was divided among you and the 5 developers. But now, since you've fired all the developers and you're using AI directly instead, now if anything goes wrong, it's your responsibility. You can't share that responsibility with anybody else because you fired all those people. So it's not just a matter of like the technical parts of it. Like there's the responsibility aspect, and responsibility is the domain of humans. You can't hold a machine accountable. You can't hold a machine responsible for something, because like, why is that? Well, a human can be given responsibility because if that human like does a bad job, you can fire that person and they actually care about getting fired, and you can get a different person to do it. Whereas a machine, it doesn't care about getting fired. I have to mentally explore that more, but like, I think it's pretty clear that like, you can only give responsibility to a human, not a machine. So even if we, from a technical perspective, could replace every developer on Earth with AI, I really don't think people would want to, because that shifts the responsibility up a level. And now instead of delegating, now everything's on your shoulders. That would be terrible. Nobody wants that. Anyway, I think it's smart to understand all the code that goes into your code base. So I'm not going to just accept this code as is. I'm going to actually make sure I understand it. Word.frequency equals hash.new 0. I don't know what that does. So I'm going to go make an IRB console hash.new 0. Okay, that's just an empty hash apparently.
It means that 0 is going to be the default value for a missing key.
Interesting. Okay. Text.split, I understand that. And then it iterates over those words. Word frequency, word.capitalize plus equals 1. I don't like that it did the capitalization step already. I feel like that should have been left out, because that's like a different behavior. Word frequency. All right, so I'm going to tell it that it fucked up. Okay, you wrote too much code. We haven't written a test for capitalization yet. Yeah, you should be sorry. Okay. Now this test fails. Which is good because this will probably prompt ChatGPT to write another test, but maybe not. Let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I don't remember. We were expecting them in uppercase. Is that what it was? Oh, yeah, apparently so. Okay, so I'll replace this. Okay, now the test passes. Okay, now we can change to uppercase. And we already have that from before. And you know, I realize now that I was kind of mistaken. Like we did have a test for the uppercase part. I just like didn't notice it because I didn't know I was doing lowercase in one part and uppercase in the other. So I'm happy to use this version. Then that of course fails because we changed the application code. We'll put in that. Okay, so we're back to good. Somebody pointed out, Dimitro pointed out it doesn't sort. So yeah, let's do that. That's a good one, Mike. I'll let you try that one. Okay. Now add a separate test case that asserts that the word list will be given back to us in alphabetical order. I switched to Dvorak. I'm still learning. It was a terrible idea. Okay, so there's our original test, of course. Returns words sorted alphabetically. No, that's not good. Yeah. Okay. That's not good. That test is tautological. Also, it's kind of hard to understand. I want to see example text like in the other test case. I'll make this point too, which I think is a really important point. I originally thought that maybe this GPT-assisted TDD would lower the bar and you could do TDD with less skill. I think this actually requires at least as much, if not more skill than writing the tests yourself, because I had to recognize just now that this test sucked. And I had to tell it exactly why that test was bad and tell it how to rewrite the test. But if you don't know, then you don't know. You're just going to take this test and be like, I guess that's the way it should be, and you'll use it. So this is not a substitute for skill. This is just, at most, it'll let somebody who's skilled it'll let somebody who's skilled be more efficient, but it won't let somebody who isn't skilled. It's not a replacement for not having those skills in this particular application. Okay, so now it looks like it did a little better. It has words that are not in alphabetical order. apple, banana, cherry. No, that's still, well, okay, whatever. That's fine enough, I guess. I was going to say it doesn't account for having the words first ordered by frequency, then by alphabetical, but I don't think that is something I should worry about yet. All right, so I'm going to copy this. And I think we'll do this example and then that's it for tonight. I'll take this and paste that in. And this is maybe a bit of an issue. I can't copy paste all that.
ChatGPT also thinks you're still capitalizing things. Or is that you're not capitalizing things?
Oh,
Because you copied and pasted from history.
I thought I meant to do that. I don't remember though. Oh, weird. Now it's starting with that. Well, I am hopeful that it'll all smooth out. Okay, this test case was written. Oh, I see. I hadn't read that part yet. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna, well, maybe it will. I don't know. Okay, it passes. Okay, now I'm going to say I actually want all the text to be lowercase and the results to be in title case. And then I expect it to give me a new test. It'd be nice if it typed a little faster. Yeah, obviously this workflow is nowhere near viable for production coding yet for a number of reasons. One being that you get back your code slower than you could probably think it up yourself. Okay, so we will paste that one. It still passes. Oh, maybe we still have, okay, I'm gonna do this. GPT-TDD. Okay, we still have that capitalized thing in there, so I guess that's why it still passes. Okay, whatever. I think I said we would be done after that, but I just can't help myself. I want this to be in order. Change the second test case so the words are in order by frequency and then alphabetical. I wonder if it's just going to rearrange the same stuff or give me something totally new. Maybe less instructive. Yeah, I don't know. At some point, it seems like your desires are sufficiently fine-grained that there's no other way around it. Okay, apple, banana, cherry. Yeah, that's different from the original, but there's two of each of them. That's not good.
Cheating.
Yeah. No, the count can't all be two. Whoops. That defeats the purpose. Make the counts be different for each word. Wait. This is actually like not quite that simple.
Should this be 2 different tests?
Maybe it should be. What are you thinking?
Like one that's, if I were writing this, I would want to have the first test that you have there right now would be like banana, apple, and making sure that comes out as apple 1, banana 1. And doing another test, we're doing banana, apple, banana. And that's going to come out with banana 2, apple 1. That way you can be checking the sort for the count separately from the sort for being alphabetical.
Yeah. Okay. That's Jonathan. That's a pretty big dive. I think everything you just said is exactly right. But that's a sufficient divergence from what's there now that it would take more time than I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to do something, and maybe it's not great. Okay. Let's change the count for cherry to 1. Make there be just 1 cherry instead of 2.
Actually, you can still put it at the end of the list. If you had 3 cherries, that would bump it to the top.
Oh, you're right. Crap. Okay. Stop generating. Do 3 cherries, actually. By the way, just that is pretty impressive. I can say do 3 cherries, and it knows that I mean 3 occurrences of the word cherry. I find that pretty impressive. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Now I promise this will be the last test case that we'll deal with. Interesting. I didn't expect that to pass. Why did that pass? Let's look at the application code. I have to admit, I don't understand.
Yeah, the hashes are equal. They're the order doesn't matter.
The hashes are equal, the order doesn't matter. I don't understand still.
Because with an array, your order is going to matter, right? But with the
Oh, I
hash, it's just
see.
checking your keys and values.
Ha. Yeah, great point. Okay. It shouldn't be returning a hash. It should return an array of hashes. Okay, wonderful. And obviously this is going to completely fail because the output isn't even in the right format anymore. Okay. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen. Okay. So I know this is like incomplete, but I'll give it this, see what it does with that. I'm going to update the application code. There's some new chat messages. Yeah. Okay. See how it does with this. Okay, we're passing. Okay, and there we have it, folks. We have this test for word counter and the application code for word counter. Voila, voila. We can deploy it to production and hook up Stripe and start making some money. Sort by a -_1 is an idiomatic trick. I don't understand, but oh, maybe you meant that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not even going to try to understand this because that's not the point of what we're doing here. Yeah, the point is that this is incredible. We just came up with some high-level requirements. I mean, I guess we did more than that, but we kind of guided it, but it wrote the test and then it wrote the code to make the test pass. I think that's it's pretty interesting, if nothing else. Okay, that's it for my presentation. Now let's open it up for just discussion. Anybody want to talk about anything? We've covered a lot so far. Anything anybody wants to ask or comment on or anything like that?
So
I thought this was awesome. Sorry, I just wanted to share an experience I had today really quickly where I had to query a Postgres database that is unfortunately full of JSON data. And I needed to know how the data mutated over time, how the keys were added to or removed, deeply nested. And I'm deeply uncomfortable with Postgres querying JSON data. And I was able to basically pair with ChatGPT, spent a couple hours, but it would have taken me a week or two to figure this out, and I gave me a solution for going over all these millions of rows and basically extracting the variations of the JSON schema over time.
That's so great. And that was a case of doing what I think is a great use case for ChatGPT, which is eliminating intellectual ditch digging. Because Mike, you're like a smart person. I think. I don't know if that's actually the case. I think you're a smart person. Clearly you are. And so you don't want to tie up your like precious resource of your brain and do this like stupid, like low level stuff, like looking through all this, looking through these keys and trying to identify differences. Like that's just grunt work. So outsourcing that to ChatGPT, and you said that would have taken you maybe weeks and instead it took hours, like that's so clearly a win.
Yeah, and I'm also using it for document composition. I'm like, well, I need to write a spike, and what I'm trying to communicate is this, that, and the other thing, and here's my acceptance criteria. And I just sit there and talk to it through Mac dictation and tell it what I want. And in a scary fast amount of time, it gives me a rough draft that I then, of course, take and reword and repurpose. But all that grunt work of document composition, and I even, prompt it, I say, to the extent possible, write this in my voice using the idioms that I'm giving you right now of my speech. And it's kind of awesome and terrifying.
Yeah. And I think of ChatGPT as a mental WD-40. It's like when I'm stuck on something, ChatGPT doesn't have to give me the right answer. If it just gives me something, even if it gives me something that I hate, that's at least something that I can look at and say, oh, I hate this. Oh, now I know what I want to do because I see this thing that I don't want to do. It like gets me unstuck.
It gives you the raw materials and you just rework it until it's something human.
Yeah. Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, I think interacting with ChatGPT is a skill in and of itself. And I've tried to learn XPath using ChatGPT, and it helped me part of the way through, but then it did give me incorrect advice, which took me down. It was kind of a time sink. So I mean, there's pluses and minuses, and I'm sure there are ways to use it well, but you have to discard, and is quickly, right? So it's possible that it will improve more and more, and you won't need to use those still. But at the moment, it is I've met again.
Oh, sorry, Nelson, we lost your connection. I don't know if you can hear me, but things froze up. Maybe we're back to good. Try again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I've met up against a lot of dead ends trying to use it, where you know, sometimes it speeds me up very, very fast, and sometimes it takes me down the wrong path. And I think it will take more skill to know when to use it and when to not.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think there's also an aspect to sometimes it's going to help you, sometimes it's going to waste your time, but as long as it works out on average, it's a win.
Yeah, I would say that the amount of time that I spend trying to figure out what I was, if I made a plan and I followed that plan through to the point where you realize you've spent a bunch of time on something and it was a dead end. Like that happens to me a lot. So you definitely need to learn when to cut bait and go with any tool or any approach.
Yeah, definitely.
It does help you fail fast, though. Like I experienced that today. I was working with it, was writing queries with me, and then I realized, well, I don't really care when the JSON schema changed. I just care that it changed. I just need to know what is the Cartesian product of all possible schemas, right? So yeah, for me, I found often it at least helps me get to the wrong place quicker, and that's proves to be surprisingly useful.
All right, what else?
I also wanted to comment about, you know, when you said, you know, AI will not replace us. I mean, I think the premise is that AI makes us more productive, right? So in theory, we will get more done in less time. And maybe that means that we won't get replaced, but, you know, if a shop has 5 developers, maybe it only needs 4 now. So you're not going to replace everybody, but someone might go.
Yeah, what I expect will happen is, okay, so what's true right now is that there's a spectrum of levels of sophistication and ability and all that stuff among developers. And the most competent developers earn way more than the least competent developers, and they probably have a better job, a better day-to-day job experience too. Like if you're a really crappy developer, you probably have to work at some like local bank or something like that, working on their crappy mobile application or something. Like you're not going to get the best, you're not going to go work at GitHub or something. But I bet there's, you know, programmers out there still not using version control and stuff like that. And those are not the top earners. But if you go back to like the 90s, you know, I'm sure there was less of a spread of sophistication levels because there wasn't as much stuff. But now that we have these modern web services, there's AWS, Kubernetes, Docker, all that stuff. There's so much more stuff to know. And so the disparity between the bottom and the top is so great. And so I think with ChatGPT, the top is going to get raised. And so developers who are already really good now, and they add ChatGPT to the mix and they get like so much more productive, they're going to be so much more valuable. There will still be a big slice of the industry that's not using it at all. They'll just get, their salaries will get lower. These salaries will get higher. And I think that, I think what you said, Nelson, is probably totally right. But I wonder if maybe, right now it seems like the demand for good developers is basically infinite. Any place, if they could add another really good developer, they would. Maybe that's not quite true now that I say it out loud, but it's the case at a lot of places a lot of the time. And so maybe if we get more super good developers, they'll just get eaten up as fast as they can. And then again, those worst developers will just have to work somewhere worse, because those worse places will just have to take what they can get, and they kind of deserve each other or whatever. Maybe that's how it will play out. In a sense, it's kind of idle speculation, not worth, kind of pointless to do, but that's kind of my prediction of what will happen.
The other way it could go is, something that I've heard about tech.
Sorry, we
They produce
lost
the code very quickly.
we lost you again, Nelson. The first thing I heard, the only thing I heard was the other way it could go.
Oh, so for something like what I've heard before said about 10x developers, if you've heard the term,
Oh yeah.
is that they produce 10x of the code, but a lot of what they produce might also need to be cleaned up by a whole bunch of people, because they're moving very, very quickly. They might be introducing a lot of bugs. And when you have a tool that allows you to go very, very quickly and without understanding every single bit of the code, it's also possible that you could seem to be very, very productive. But then, 2 or 3 months down the line, you have all these errors in production that slow you down, because ultimately you introduced code that you didn't understand, and now you have to debug code that you never understood in the first place.
Yeah, I think you're so right. People talk about, so ChatGPT, AI in general, it both lowers the bar and raises the bar. Like, to use it skillfully will take more skill. To your point, Nelson, about ChatGPT, using it is a skill in and of itself. And then people who aren't very skilled programmers could use ChatGPT to lower the bar, and now they can write code. But I think there's two ways that can happen. One, exactly like you said, Nelson, I think a lot of developers are going to end up creating a huge mess because they find that they can get ChatGPT to write things that are like, they don't understand it, but they use it anyway. And that's obviously bad, and that's going to cause a lot of hurt for a lot of people. But then the other way is like, if there's some like marketing person and they want an ad hoc report, maybe ChatGPT can help them write an SQL query to get something they previously would have had to ask a developer to do, but they can get that. The difference being that the query is a throwaway thing. It never needs to be understood again after today. Whereas somebody creating a mess out of copy pasted GPT code, that's the dangerous scenario. So yeah, Nelson, I totally agree that probably will happen. Okay, well, I probably want to wrap it up pretty soon, but does anybody else have any thoughts or questions or anything like that before we go? Okay. I also want to let you guys know that I'm working on a ChatGPT book. I don't have anywhere to sign up to get notified or anything like that. I don't even think I'm going to do anything like that. I'm not trying to make this a big money maker type thing, but I'm writing this book to kind of distill my own thoughts and stuff like that, because I want to be really good at using ChatGPT, and I don't feel like I can be really good at using ChatGPT unless I like decide what's what and figure out what I really think and like document my ways of using it and stuff like that. So I'm doing that for myself, but then I'll share it with other people when it's done. So just know that I'm writing a ChatGPT book. And if you're on my email newsletter, you'll hear about it. If you're watching this on YouTube right now and you're not on my email newsletter, go to codewithjason.com. It's pretty easy to figure out how to get on it there. And then if you also go to codewithjason.com, you can get on my snail mail newsletter. and you'll get notified about it that way too, for sure. Thanks everybody for coming tonight, and I will see you next time.
Take care.